3 months ago, I embarked on a quest. I tasked myself with what I thought was an incredibly dumb responsibility, but given how many people tuned in, well, it's either not dumb, or we are all dumb. Do with that info what you will. Jokes aside, that quest was to go through the Halo games one by one and systematically answer the question, can you beat Halo, insert entry, without jumping? For those of you who have already watched the individual videos, thank you for your support. But also stick around. There are some slight alterations to certain parts of the challenges that you may be interested in seeing. For those of you who are new here, this video compiles a bunch of prior videos, but they're polished and, it's a definitive final product for you to consume all in one place. But the original videos do contain some content that won't be in this one. So if interested, feel free to go check them out as well. Consider dropping a like and subscribing, and as always, I hope you enjoy the video. Breaking the video down, level by level, for each game. And I'll be taking out the intros from the original videos and also the outros. So hopefully it flows smoothly for you guys. In 2014, Halo the Master Chief Collection would be released as a way to deliver Halo 2 Anniversary alongside all the other games that Master Chief had been in up to this point. Since its release, it has also become a hub for other Halo games that were left behind on the Xbox 360. Up to this day, it has served as a reliable hub for players to return to older Halo games. But today, we are all here for the same dumb question. Whether it be genuine interest or a morbid curiosity, we are here to answer, can you beat Halo MCC without jumping? Pillar of Autumn is the first mission in the game and serves not only as a starting point for the game's narrative, but also as a tutorial for the basics of the game. This includes walking, moving your head, charging your shield, and yes, how to jump. It's a good thing Bungie made sure to make obstacles for all the essential player controls, but we're trying to avoid jumping, so let's find another way. Luckily, there is a solution to this, and it is due in large part to the movement physics of Halo CE. Everything may feel a little slippery to new players, but this is because the players keep their momentum when changing directions, stopping, and other movements. Because of this, you may come to a stop when you hit a wall, but if you were to hit a slope, you will actually carry that momentum and it'll push you up the slope. We'll use that to get over this first pipe. Took a few tries of running into the wall, but we eventually got up and over the pipe. The rest of the level plays out relatively normally. There were some parts that I would normally jump at, but, well, I can't. So, all in all, only slowed down my gameplay a tad bit. With the Pillar of Autumn complete, we earned the achievement Feet Firmly Planted, which you get this for completing a level without jumping. One level's cool, but we're going for all 10. Next level is Halo, the mission where you land on, well, Halo. This level is probably one of the easiest for this challenge, as for a majority of the level, you are in a Warthog, and the parts you are not, there are no challenging obstacles like the pipe in Pillar of Autumn. So unless you count 6 jumps in a Warthog, this level can also be completed jumpless. Next on our hit list is Truth and Reconciliation to rescue Captain Keyes. When starting this challenge, I misremembered boulders that blocked your path leading to the carrier's gravity lift, but in reality, any obstacles that are akin to this, you can just walk around. So in this case, we were easily able to get into the ship without jumping. As for the interior of the ship, well, there are no problems, but considering all the normal jump skips I would normally use, that can't be used for this challenge, this level took me quite a bit longer than it normally would. The only notable thing I have down for this mission is a funny moment that transpired near the finale. We didn't succeed at saving Captain Keyes. He actually got wrecked, but the game still counted it as a success, so I guess Captain Keyes is canonically dead. And speaking of Keyes dying, he just got blown up. Oh no. Oh, the mission completed. The Silent Cartographer is one of the most iconic Halo levels. It is really cool compared to some of the other missions that are more linear. The island truly gives you some options on how to approach objectives. I went headlong into combat like usual, but it's still nice to have the options. I tried to do a warthog fling to skip part of the mission, but unfortunately I am no speedrunner, so that's not happening. Fortunately, none of the parts I would have skipped require jumping, just some combat encounters. We aren't facing too much difficulty yet, but it was at this point I started to think ahead and I figured there were some challenges coming up. The next mission, Assault on the Control Room, is one of the longer missions in the game, but given that there are several vehicle combat sections, I did not think that there would be issues with keeping our challenge. Sure, it's a little frustrating not being able to do some of the regular hops, but it is still very feasible. The Scorpion made most of the level trivial, and stealing a Banshee made it very easy to avoid the frustrating climb back to the control room. Revisionist me here, if you couldn't tell in the obvious break in my rhythm. In the original video for this challenge, there were some obvious difficulties. There is this free route bridge, which using the slope method from the first mission is easy to clear. Then there was this door that is sitting off the ground. We also cleared that using different methods with the shade turret. And finally, we cleared the pile of rubble using more slopes and crouch spamming. But after all that, we come to two obstacles that are a leap in difficulty. The first being a stack of crates you are meant to jump on to reach the next floor. In the original video, I was able to find a vanilla solution that was very luck-based. I'll just let previous me explain that. See, our next path to progress was through the doorway on the other side of the bridge, all the way over there. If we were allowed to jump, we could time our hops across the bridge, or better yet, hop across the archways. But given we can't jump, those aren't options. But you see, the thing about this bridge, sometimes it has collision when it's not visible. Sometimes it has no collision when it is visible. And to be honest, I'm unsure if the intervals are randomized or not. But if we could just cross this bridge, we could avoid that first obstacle that is standing in the way of completing this challenge. I tried lots of tactics, like getting Flood to push me, bumping off debris, and grenading to get a tiny bit of elevation. But nothing seemed to be getting me anywhere close to the height or distance I needed. But through my trial and error, I learned a couple things. 1, the bridge has no consistency. And 2, the crouch jump method we used earlier can be used to clip with the bridge hitbox to get me back onto the bridge after it flickers and drops me. In addition to this, if I time a grenade just right, it can give me just the push I need to get across. So I began running across the bridge over and over and over and over and over and over until I finally got the perfect attempt. You can see just how excited I was. I really lucked out with that one, and I should not expect any more luck like that going forward. Given my fumbling, I almost screwed it up crouching at the end, but that also may have been what helped me. I don't know. I can only assume that the hitbox was just barely high enough to bump me back up onto the top of the bridge once it flickered back on. If I had to speculate, I think it would work similarly to the flood bump trick, but given I don't really know how that works either, I have no idea. But if it works, it works. But back to what I was saying, the next obstacle was where the challenge became debatable. This room is the biggest instance of a platform challenge in Halo Combat Evolved. In the original video, I resorted to turning on the Sputnik skull and allowing the flood to pummel me up onto the next floor. Mind you, this method was praised as being creative and a result of pure determination by you guys in the comments. But there were certainly those who would have preferred a solution that did not require skulls and was purely vanilla, which is understandable. And with the help of a fellow YouTuber, Spasmodic Gaming, I was able to find a working solution. Of course, check out their channel in the description to show some love. But let me break it down for you. In my original attempt of the challenge, I primarily used grenades for horizontal boost, as the blast provided a significant push. I did not, however, use them for vertical boost very often, because without jumping, the boost they provide is pretty weak. But that's the catch, it still gives you a little bit of a vertical bump. So the solution that Spasmodic used, and that I used when making this revision, is akin to a combination of our former tricks. The columns in the room have a steep slope, but it only begins a few inches off the ground. So with proper timing, a grenade can be tossed near the base of the column, and with a running start, you can actually get onto the slope of the column. With enough horizontal momentum and a well-timed grenade, it is possible to use the momentum to get far enough up the slope to reach the first platform. From here, you must put a grenade in the cracks between the chunks of the platform, and as it detonates, move forward. And I have no idea why, but for some reason, this specific setup, and I'm assuming it's because of the small slopes, this setup gives you a massive vertical push. Mind you, about as much as a standard jump, probably more. So with this crazy boost, it is easy to get onto the second floor and exit the rest of the structure without an issue. Again, a massive thank you to Spasmodic Gaming for showing me the solution, and with that, I will let Past Me take it away again. Comparing to the last level, the library is actually a breeze, for once. All of the elevators and tunnels are accessible by ramps, so no jumping's needed. But one thing I did note is that not being able to jump makes the combat loop a lot harder. Since the Flood upgrade from small arms fire to high yield ordnances, they will get you a few times, but you'll eventually get it. After several attempts, I was able to clear the library and retrieve the index. Going into two betrayals, I was kind of getting worried about these missions where you backtrack through previous levels. Frequently in the campaign, there's spots where you drop down, you don't need to jump, and that has actually been beneficial to us. But if we're going back through those same spots and we need to jump back up where we dropped down from, well, guess what? That's not going to work. Luckily, Two Betrayals doesn't have that issue, and a lot of the level can be flown in a Banshee. And there is one slope that I kind of just described where you drop down from it previously that you gotta climb back over this time, but instead of jumping, we're able to just hop in a ghost and kind of glide into it and go over the hump. It's a good thing we didn't exempt vehicles, or this would be impossible. The enemies gave me more trouble than the challenge did, and that's because I suck, but also Relentless Banshee Pursuits, Wraiths, and several Rocket Floods. But once we clear all 3 points, we are done with this level. And Keys is basically the same mission as Truth and Wreck. The only difference is the terrain beneath the cruiser. If we're able to reach the gravity lift, we should be able to easily clear the level. And we did it. Luckily, there was no obstacles in the way to the lift. The ship's interior has a few more holes than before, and a bit more flood than I would like. But once we get Keys chip, and we clear the bridge, we are home free. Drop down to the Banshee, and we're out. The final mission, the Mall. Yeah, I was worried about this one. During the Pillar of Autumn, we saw how easy it was to navigate the ship, but this one adds a couple of extra sections. Luckily, the Cryo Bay has ladders now. It didn't before, but it does now. I was worried about the reactor. Usually I go up the wrong side and have to jump off some barrels to reach the 3rd level. And then from there I would jump on and off the platforms while blasting the reactor to avoid going up the ramps again. Luckily one side goes to the 3rd floor, so we didn't have to jump on barrels like I just said. And after several failed attempts of trying to do it safely and getting like a 2-for-1, I decided to just drop down and go back up for each of the heat sinks. And with the reactor destroyed, we can make our escape, and there's only one more thing we need to do. Hell yeah! Got the 360 tailspin on the first try. Let's go. Cairo Station is easy to complete with this challenge. There are stairs linking the different floors of the station, and even elevators at some portions. The only part I would expect a challenge from is the space walks, but due to the low gravity while outside the station, all the slopes are easy to climb, and there's no obstacles blocking progression. The combat challenges that come in this game are from the new enemy types, like drones and specialist elites, and other enemies we'll see a little bit later, along with the smarter enemy AI. Despite this making combat encounters slightly harder, the new shield and health system is more forgiving, balancing it out and making enemy encounters overall less taxing for our challenge. Next up is the mission Outskirts. Given that the layout of this level is a war-torn city, I thought it would give us a lot of trouble. After all, in Halo CE, our biggest challenge was destroyed architecture. This would only be a challenge up till we get through Hotel Zanzibar. Past that point, the mission becomes a vehicle run-through, so that's basically our goal here. After the firefight in the courtyard, we made our way through the alleyways. The challenge did make it impossible to run across rooftops and to retrieve secret weapon stashes, but to make up for that, I simply nabbed Johnson's sniper off of him. Just barely though, he almost got away with it. After clearing out the Covenant, we finally made it to the hotel, and we were free to drive through the rest of the level. The fact that there was no debris in our way was a pleasant surprise. Metropolis is our next mission. Despite most of the mission involving trailing the Scarab, there's a surprising lack of devastation left in its wake. Rolling through the bridge section was a breeze, but once we exited the Scorpion, we come across a slight issue. Once you enter the tunnel on foot, it is impossible to go directly up the slopes connecting the roadway and the walkway. The only way through is on the walkway. So once we drop down, you would think that we were stuck, but fortunately for us, there is some debris that can be used like a ramp and get back up onto the walkway. But again, the walkway is blocked at this part. There's boxes in the ways. The question here is, are they movable? Yes they are. We can throw a couple of grenades and it moves them just enough to be able to squeeze through. Once through, we can exit the tunnels and there's another short vehicle section. Once we ride through on the Warthog, it's time to board the Scarab. I didn't want to risk trying to board at the end of the canal because I thought the gap between the walkway and the Scarab would be too wide, so instead I boarded it as it went under one of the bridges. After a few tries, because I suck, I'm able to complete the mission without jumping. After all that he's been through, Master Chief finally gets to take a break. Now we are playing as the Arbiter on the mission, the Arbiter. During this mission, we are introduced to the Energy Sword. This isn't the first time you can encounter it in Halo 2, but because of the challenge, this is the first time we're getting our hands on it. Here's the thing about the Energy Sword. It lets you lunge at opponents. If the reticle is red, no matter their location relative to you, you can reach them. This is huge for vertical mobility, which so far has been lacking. Halo 2 also lets you lunge with regular melees, which is not nearly as far as the sword's lunge, but we have not been able to make use of that just yet, but it will come back up. Anyways, the Arbiter's mission is to hunt down the heretic leader, so we do that. After trekking through the station, which is full of accessible ramps, we get to the section with the Banshees. This is a vehicle section, so it would not cause any issues anyways, but to save time, I skipped the level by flying to the end of the mission. The Oracle is the mission that reintroduces the Flood. If you remember the mission 343 Guilty Spark from Combat Evolved, you may recall this gave us a lot of trouble. I was terrified of having the same experience since the mission served the same purpose, but instead it wasn't that bad. I presume it's because the first part of the level is not quite destroyed as the facility in the first game, and for most of it you're riding down an elevator fighting the Flood. And then after that is just a brief firefight with the Flood. I used this section to start practicing with the sword and to truly see how it can help our vertical navigation, and I gotta say, I was impressed. Now it was time to go cut the cables to get to the next part of the mission. There is an elevator that goes to the top and then ramps that lead to the cables, so there's no issues there. After we chased him through the station, making use of the Arbor's amazing active camo, I thought the boss fight with the Heretic would be difficult, but as it turns out, it's not. Even though he has a jetpack, we also have a heat-seeking sword, so he was easily dealt with. The Arbiter is yet to truly get challenged, but trust me, his time will come. Now we are back with Chief on the mission Delta Halo, my favorite level in the franchise. This mission is another massive vehicle-centric level. The first firefight at the ruins does not require any jumping, although it does prevent us from getting more rocket ammo. But that's okay because during this first little firefight, an elite drops a sword, and that is far more important to our challenge than a rocket launcher. We use the Warthog to get the bridge down, and then once the bridge is down, we get a tank and we roll up to the larger ruins. Once there, we are forced to dismount. Given how the ruins are crumbling, you would assume that there would be a lot of obstacles, but it was easy enough to navigate around a lot of the rubble. Then we get to the small valley that has jackals everywhere, and I thought this section would be more difficult. I thought it would require jumping up to get out of the valley once you go down, but as it turns out, there's a massive slope that you can use to walk right up. So with that, we wrap up Delta Halo. Now on to Regret. For this mission, you take multiple gondolas and elevators in order to reach the Prophet at the temple in the lake. So for this mission, it is all about the between sections, and we have our safety sword just in case there are any high ledges we need to reach. During this first part, I had a glitch where the hunters and the phantoms just vanished. So that's pretty cool. Didn't really affect the challenge, but cool glitch that helped us out a little bit. During the gondola section, I, as a kid mind you, always thought you had to board the other in order to restart them, but it turns out you can just start it from the one you are on. You learn something new every day. Not important to the challenge, but I just thought it was fun to mention. The underwater ruins had a lot of ramps, making it easy to navigate. The only challenge comes from the enemy honor guards, hunters, and some sniper jackals. Once we emerge, we are able to navigate through the rubble with no problem. Riding the final gondola, we are able to reach Regret and punch his lights out. We are now back following the Arbiter, and Sacred Icon hits like a literal truck. Right out the gate, there is a short wall blocking our progress. Taking a closer look at the wall, we can see there are slopes that we could walk up, but first we need to reach them. I tried pushing many of the boxes to reach it, and that didn't work. Grenades didn't give us a push we needed either. But after fooling around for a minute, sentinels start to spawn out of the ports in the walls. But here's the thing, we don't have the energy sword on this level. We spawn with a plasma pistol, so there's no sword lunge that we can make use of yet. So this is where I had a light bulb moment. Remember how I said the regular melee also has a small lunge? Like not nearly as much as the sword, not even close. Well, I was still able to make use of it. I attracted a sentinel over towards me, and with the right timing I was able to lunge up and get onto the part of the ledge that connected to the slope. So we are able to walk up the slope and onto the next little section. Thank gosh. We release the pillar to progress and we go down. It's probably really good that this mission takes you down instead of up, because if you had to hop onto these pillars to get up, that would be a nightmare scenario. I was really worried given that that was the first room of the level, but the next section was more forgiving. We fought through the next rooms and we deactivated the shield that was protected by the Enforcer. With the shield disengaged, we crossed the chasm on a gondola where we are immediately faced with our next challenge. The door to progress is several feet off the ground and we still don't have a sword. Our regular lunge was not going to cut it this time, it was way too high. The checkpoint that I had kept sending me back across the chasm, so I had to ride the gondola every time I reset it. But this was actually a good thing because it led to a fortunate discovery. When the gondola rose up, I got launched. And when this first happened, I had no idea why it happened. So I went back and I watched the footage, and I figured out that this was caused by my hitbox colliding with the Enforcer's hitbox. And he smushed me against the geometry of the gondola. And I guess since I have the smaller hitbox, or maybe because I was sandwiched in between them, it caused me to launch. Given that glitches are our best ally in this challenge, I made a point to utilize this discovery, and so I mastered it. I was able to launch myself to the ledge above the door, and after it was opened, once enemies were cleared, I was able to drop in and start to progress. And then there was this. These short walls acted as hurdles. There was multiple of them. The melee lunge seemed like it was so close to working, but I could never get it to work no matter how many times I tried. And I'm gonna stop you right there. Alrighty fellas, revisionist me here, back again. So, let me fill you in on what I was about to say there. You see, I once again resorted to the help of skulls at that part, but that is most certainly not needed here. See, you guys who are well versed in Halo 2 reminded me in the comments of the original video that there's this little thing, you know, a barely useful trick. It's called BXB. Don't know if you've ever heard of it. Jokes aside, I had forgotten about this completely, and given that the first obstacle used a melee lunge, well, the answer was right in front of me, now wasn't it? For those of you who do not know, BXB is a glitch where you spam reload in melee, and well, this allows you to punch really fast. It was in Halo Infinite during beta, so there are probably a few of newer Halo fans who will also be familiar kind of with this, because it did make a return. But anyways, this also allows for you to rapidly melee lunge. And you guys made sure to remind me of that during the original video, so I went back and, well, I cleared the level using BXB, which did take some time, but it was mostly easy. The only part I couldn't get this to work at was literally the last obstacle. Real nail biting, am I right? I was able to find another solution though. Again, ironically, the answer lays with frag grenades. Turns out, the small vertical bump is all you need to get onto the lip of this spot. And then it's easy as running up the slope, like the first obstacle. So yeah, with that, we have a completely vanilla clear for this level. Quarantine Zone starts with a large vehicle section. We clash with enforcers, and we also clear fields of flood. Then our path is blocked by a crashed Sentinel factory. I was slightly concerned about how the terrain may treat us, but we had our safety sword just in case. Luckily, we were able to navigate through while taking out flood and Sentinels alike. The final section is another gondola. Luckily, the entire thing is made of ramps and flat surfaces. So once we reach the end of the ride, all we have to do is navigate the top floor of the library, and just like Combat Evolved, it gave us no issues. The next mission goes back to Chief with Gravemind. Ironically, this mission doesn't have the flood, despite being named after them. So Chief will get off easy for now, not having to deal with flood, but this mission does have a few difficulties. Most of the level is a breeze with easy slopes and gravity lifts that allow you to go between floors, but then there was a doorway, and this thing has a lip on the ground, and for some reason you can't walk over it. Also weird, a Marine can walk right over it without jumping. but you, the player, can't. And despite having a sword at this part, there's no enemies to lunge at, so we can't really make use of that. Good news, there's a rock beside it. Even better news, there's a slope leading up to this rock. It takes a few times, but I'm able to drop down, but it's gotta be perfect, because you can't bump your head on the seal of the door or you will fall and not make it over the little lip on the floor. From here though, there are no issues. Except for one hazard. It's not like an obstacle, it's a hazard, because it's like a trap for this specific challenge. If you go down to this area, you get stuck. You can't jump out, and if all the enemies are gone, well, you can't lunge down either. Luckily, it didn't save, so I just reloaded a checkpoint, and instead of going back down there, I just stayed out of the pool, for lack of better words, and we were able to clear the mission. Now, back to the Arbiter on mission Uprising. All the interiors are easy to clear thanks to ramps. We fight lots of brutes that gives us a bit of trouble, but we also have elites fighting by our side, so we clear them. There is a vehicle section that again trivializes the challenge. There is another interior section that we clear, and once we come out on the other side, we are finished with this mission. Nothing really to say about that one, it was pretty simple. The Chief's final mission is pretty short, and it's probably because a Warthog run was cut from it, but I'm not complaining, because guess what? That means less challenge complete. This is a flood level though, so anything could happen. There are these short sections where if we fall into the water, we could be doomed and not get back up, but we're able to just stay on the ledge, so it's easy to stay on track. The Prophets have an elevator that takes us to their inner sanctum, where we can grab a sword just in case, but we don't need it because we just go up one more gravity lift and we just run to the end of the level with no obstacles to clear this time. The Arbiter's final mission will end us off. First, we have to fight through the canyon to reach the next segment. It's no problem since we're in a Wraith. We then fight through this section to reach the Scarab, and I cannot stress how thankful I am for the Forerunners to use ramps in their architecture. Once we free these prisoners, we reach this Scarab where we get to take flight in a Banshee. We clear the way for Johnson and the Scarab, blasting through the doors to confront Tartarus. I was a little worried that the explosive entrance would make the entrance hard to navigate without jumping, but it was actually rather easy to walk through. When confronting Tartarus though, well, there's a bit of an issue now. This gap between us and the arena is a lot bigger than I thought it would be, and unfortunately I suck at the sword flying glitch. But I did manage to find a solution that requires a lot less skill. The sword lunge still helps us get into the arena, we just have to walk off the ledge and lunge Tartarus before we fall out of range. Luckily, I was able to do this consistently, as the fight itself is another challenge in and of itself. Turns out Tartarus is not that easy without the ability to jump in order to dodge. I ended up having to learn to sidestep, and I also flung tons of grenades and popped him with the beam rifle a lot. The arena was also easy to navigate given the central gravity lift and holes to drop down. I just had to make sure I was not cornered, and with enough teamwork with the elites and Johnson, we take the Mohawk down. 0117 is the first full mission in the game, and unlike the first two, you start in a jungle instead of a nice cozy ship interior. But that's okay, right? Nothing to worry about. Wrong! This mission starts out with a whole sleuth of jumps. There's a log and several cliff ledges. But let's take it slow. First for the log. There's a tree that isn't quite in the ground, and once under its roots, you can actually run into the rock slope in order to gain momentum, in order to get onto the log itself, and walk off the other side. If this seems familiar to anybody, it is because of the movement physics I discussed in the Halo Combat Evolved video. I'm glad to see this back. We didn't get to make much use of it in Halo 2. But let's continue. The next obstacle is the 2 back-to-back ledges. I initially figured out you could use the slope for the rock to climb the first ledge, similar to how we just used the other rock. Then I had to think for a little bit about how to get over the second ledge. And after a few minutes, I said to myself, you know, what if I had more speed? So I went back down the ledge and I hit the rock with a running start, and this got me close to the second ledge. Repeating it, I was able to crouch at the peak, and that compressed my hitbox enough to get on top of the ledge. Once again, if this seems familiar, we had the hitbox compression trick used in Halo Combat Evolved. This is a lot of trouble for the first few feet of the mission, but guess what? We aren't done yet. There are 2 more ledges we need to conquer, so across this pool of water is the next ledge. Unlike the first 2, there are no slopes nearby to run into. I tried a couple tricks for this one. The first was to drop onto the Arbiter and have him carry me across. I think this could work, but the amount of fidgeting required to not fall off would be insane. So instead, I thought of another plan. The next one I tried was spamming crouch in this corner where the Marines were climbing up. This nearly saw success several times. My idea was that the hitboxes colliding would either glitch me on top of a Marine, allowing me to walk onto the ledge, or maybe it could launch me like the Enforcer did in the last video. Instead, it launched the Marines. I think this is because when they clamber, it places their hitbox in between mine and the cave roof, and so when mine expands, it forces theirs out at varying speeds. This did manage to work out though, because this ended up sending a couple Marines into a dirt nap. We didn't try it before because we didn't have grenades yet, but the Marines dropped a couple, so we could make use of these. So by planting a grenade under us and spam crouching again allows us to hit the roof with enough speed to get us onto the ledge. This worked out because the wall, or the roof, was technically a slope, so it didn't stop all of our momentum. If I'm being honest, I didn't really think that would work. I thought the grenade's blast would be far too weak, but that wouldn't be the only time one of these solutions actually surprised me. Luckily, we still have 1 grenade left, and this final ledge has another negative slope that we can utilize. So once again, we plant an explosive under us, and the upward momentum allows us to hit the negative slope and gain height. If we hold forward at the peak of this, we can make it onto the ledge. And to think some of you doubted me. I'm just kidding, but please consider liking and subscribing because trust me, to figure out just this first part, well, that took hours, and of course we're not out of the jungle yet. Literally. There is a massive fallen tree blocking progress along the stream, but you can either use a rock slope to hop onto it, or more easy than that, just duck under the log. After this, the rest of the level goes pretty normal. Brutes and jackals are a pain on legendary, but no real issues keeping the challenge from being complete. The fight at the end of the level around the dam actually had no issues navigating, like you would think, because there are actually a lot of ramps and ladders that you can make use of. I was pretty tough for the first level of the game, especially compared to the others, but we managed to do it. We completed Sierra 117 without jumping. Crow's Nest is more accustomed to an early game level, a human interior with nice, clean architecture, stairs and elevators galore, no unaccompanied ledges. What is an issue is the enemies on Legendary. Drones are a pain until you reduce their numbers, and so are large groups of brutes, especially the chieftains. Regardless, given that these aren't keeping us from actually moving, I eventually get through them. One thing this level does do is introduce us to an interesting piece of equipment. So Halo 3 added equipment into the sandbox, and these are one-time use items that can help out a lot on our challenge. A majority go towards survivability or destruction, but there is one that actually assists in movement. This is the gravity lift. This is the first mission we find one, and as we saw in Halo 2, gravity lifts are extremely helpful when navigating between floors. We don't need it on this mission, but it's still useful to have, and given that this is where you find one, I thought it would be a good place to mention it. We'll likely see this thing helping us out later. But anyways, We arm the bomb, leave the base through the elevator, clearing the level with 0 jumps. Salvo Highway is your standard vehicle level, which means outside of driving warthogs, there are a few obstacles to worry about. While clearing the vehicle segments, it is important to dismount at the disrupted convoy in order to get a gravity lift from this building. Outside of this, it's nice to just take it slow and let the turret get most of the enemies. Once we get far enough, there is a segment of the highway that has collapsed. I was able to place the gravity lift and levitate over the gap. I think even if you don't have a gravity lift to clear this jump, it's not really an issue because there's a ladder just down the road, but gravity lift does save us some time. After this, we clear the gap and we are at a large firefight that once cleared, we mount up again. We stay in the warthog for a little while longer and then I get out and I cleaned up the last of the enemies at the end of the level with sniper fire. There are no obstacles I needed to clear on foot, so we easily completed this one. The Storm is an interesting level because it's not too long, but it presents us with our first Scarab fight. There are many ways to beat Scarabs on this game, including downing their legs to climb aboard. Another way is to drop from above. This would be rather risky on Legendary. And then there's the third way that, given we can't jump, this is our best option. So we down the legs of the Scarab and then with some well-placed rockets and grenades we can blow it up. Outside of this fight, it is just another standard level. All the interiors are filled with stairs and ramps, and even intrusive geometry doesn't really get in the way that much in this level because you can always just go around it. So we push through all of the wraiths and finally destroy the AA gun at the end of the mission. Floodgate is a really short mission, and it's mostly going through the previous mission just backwards. Welcome back, Halo Combat Evolved. Luckily, nothing much has changed, so we fight through the flood, which are pushovers behind you, and make our way to the downed ship. We find our first energy sword along the way, and this is where we learn that it's not nearly as useful as it was in Halo 2. You would expect the flood-infested ship to give us trouble, but given most of the biomass forms into smooth edges, we were able to make our way through without issue and retrieve Cortana's message. The arc opens with a sniping section. Apart from the enemy resistance, this section is no problem. After that, we mount up to find a landing zone for the Dawn. After grabbing a tank, we pass through the wall and fight another Scarab. Again, since we can't jump, we must rely on good grenade throws in order to blow up the Scarab. The rest of the level is easy to navigate since, as we've learned, the Forerunners love their ramps. The Covenant has 2 towers worth of basic obstacles. There are ramps and elevators to reach our objective. In between, we use Hornets and Warthogs to blow away our enemies. The first challenge we have is the Twin Scarab boss fight. Because the difficulty scaling, this becomes a more difficult boss fight. It's not safe to be on the ground given that we are wide open while destroying the Scarab from the ground. But while in the Hornet, it is easy to be blasted out of the air. But once we get one down, the second one is easy to work. When reaching Truth, the brutes and specifically their fuel rod guns can be a little bit difficult, but it's still possible to get through them. On our way out, the flood is no issue. Again, they're pushovers, so we have another level complete without jumping. I hate this mission. Cortana is difficult to complete, especially with this challenge. So for starters, I will say that a large portion of the difficulty does not come from the challenge, but from the enemies. The ranged pure forms are a pain in the butt. Setting the difficulty aside though, the level is mostly easy to navigate. The biomass and high charity create soft slopes that service to make vertical traversal easy. The issue we face here comes from clearing horizontal gaps instead of vertical ones. In this specific room full of pure forms and combat forms, there are 2 gaps that are too wide to run across. and this time around we don't have a gravity lift to help us across. What we have to work with is a brute shot. So the brute shot gives us a tiny bit of a push in terms of movement, omnidirectional of course. I picked up on this all throughout the campaign as the brutes pelted me with them. Anyways, when we fire this at our feet, if we time a crouch correctly, we are able to clear these two gaps. Once we retrieve Cortana, we have to destroy High Charity's reactors. Some people may think that you have to jump onto the pillars in order to destroy them, kinda like the cables on Halo 2, but you can actually just use grenades to destroy them from afar, so that's what I did to avoid jumping. With the reactors destroyed, all we gotta do is make our way to the Arbiter and escape High Charity without jumping. So the final mission is Halo. This one mirrors the assault on the control room mission from Halo Combat Evolved. Like, literally, it's supposed to be the same control room. But if you saw the first video, you may recall that we never actually had to climb the tower on the first one. So we don't know yet if it's possible to do it, but I'm suspecting it is. Unsurprisingly, the Forerunners love the ramps, so we can make it up quite easy as long as you don't count fighting the Flood tooth and nail for survival. Fighting 343 Guilty Spark himself is really easy, especially if you bring a bubble shield into the boss fight. So we pick up Johnson's laser and avenge him, and then it is time to leave. The snow makes for a gentle ramp in order to reach the cliffs, no jumping necessary, and there are no obstacles between us and Johnson's Warthog from here, so of course all we have left is to drive to the Dawn, and we can easily complete the game. Mombasa Streets is a very interesting mission design. Between every mission up until the last few, you come back to this mission. The map opens up more and more every time you come back to it. I'll only cover the first instance of it, as after that you primarily cover the tracks of the other campaign missions. So if it's possible to clear during the other levels, it's probably possible to clear in the Mombasa Streets missions. If it's not, I'll bring it up, but I don't think I will have to. So after a not so good drop from orbit, we wake up 6 hours later, still in our pod. And after releasing the hatch, we drop onto the street below and find the nearest phone to connect to the superintendent. After being pointed towards our first clue, we can use the stairs in this building to find Dare's helmet and start our first mission as Gunnery Sergeant Buck. Gosh, these names are a killer, man. I think you just pronounced that Tayari Plaza. Is not a super long mission. The objective is to reach Dare's pod. The mission does a good job of showing the chaos that ensues immediately after the drop, although I suppose it could have been worse. Oh no, that is pretty bad actually. So Buck's pod happened to land on a balcony that, unfortunately for us, has pretty good safety features. It doesn't allow us to just walk off. Luckily though, it has been fortified, so these sandbags at the start can be walked over using the sloped ends, although you do have to hit a sweet spot. Alternatively, a grenade can be used to boost over while not taking any real damage. Not really sure how an unaugmented soldier can take that, but whatever works. Also, you might have noticed over the past 2 videos I've been mentioning if there's multiple solutions, I'm just mentioning solutions I find because it comes that naturally now. Once we reach the street level, the mission is pretty straightforward. Despite the city being a war zone, there is not much evidence of such. It's not really relevant to the challenge, but this is one of the few things I would critique about this game. It takes place directly after the mission Metropolis on Halo 2, which means the city has had a battle rage across it, and then a subsequent slipspace rupture, and there's a lot of damage, like the destruction of the space elevator and the flooding of the metro station, and even some crashed drones. But overall, the city seems pretty well intact. I'm just saying, you see entire buildings gone in Halo 2, but in Halo 3 ODST, it seems relatively intact. You'd think that kind of destruction that can uproot entire buildings would cause a little bit more damage, but I'm literally nitpicking here. I feel bad. Anyways, that being said, the city has many stairs and ramps to navigate, both vertically and around obstacles, so Once we find Dare's pod, we find it empty and get sent back to the rookie in Mombasa streets. The next clue found leads us to Dutch's whereabouts, Uplift Reserve. This is a run-of-the-mill vehicle mission, and since all of the objectives are to reach a specific point, you don't even have to fight any of the enemies. Like the Wraiths, you can literally just drive by them. So you just get in the Warthog at the beginning of the level and drive to the end of the mission. Depending on how evasive your driving is, you can get this done fast, or it may take a couple of tries. But regardless, it's very easy to complete with no jumps. Kazingo Boulevard is also primarily a vehicle mission, but this time we play as Mickey. Once you get in the Scorpion, you are able to easily roll through large portions of the mission. The only real tricky part is the firefight near the end of the mission. You're forced to dismount and fight on foot. And this is weird because Halo 3 ODST is the easiest game on Legendary. So I figure it's because the lack of being able to jump makes the fight a little bit harder. Mobility is really important for being able to win this specific fight. Enemies are constantly trying to flank from the sides, while tougher enemies such as brutes are advancing in the center. Since we can't jump, we can't counter the flanking very well unless we aggressively snipe the enemies. So with enough well-placed shots, we're able to come out on top without jumping. Oni Alpha Site takes place shortly after the last mission. This time around, there are no vehicles to help us speed through the level. In fact, this entire mission consists of falling back further and further until you are extracted from the roof of Alpha Site by a pelican. The first step is to arm the charges to halt the Covenant from advancing across the bridge. This is easy because zigzagging seems to make them unable to hit you. The detonator needed to blow the bridge is accessible via ladders. We love ladders. So after this, we fall back behind the wall. Fighting through the courtyard is easy enough. There's no obstacles in our ways, and enemies that would be tricky to fight without jumping, like the Hunters, Chieftains, and Wraiths, can be taken out with sniper fire and the Spartan laser. So once inside the building, it's a matter of holding out till the elevators arrive. We also love elevators. After reaching the roof, all that is left is to board the Pelican, no jumps required. New Mombasa Police Department HQ takes place along the rooftops of high-rises. I would think that this would cause issues, but Romeo says a quote that it fits well here.
Thanks for picking such a tall building. I'm really digging all these stairs.
So while clearing rooftops, it's easy enough to navigate given all the stairs. When it came to crossing the gap to reach the downed Pelican, I was a little worried that the gaps between the crane and the buildings would be a little too large to clear, but given the differing elevations, it was actually easy to just step off the gaps. Surprised to be sure, but a welcome one. The rest of the mission is a firefight. Although there are lots of Banshees, there is plenty of firepower to clear them out. In fact, there is enough to also clear the Phantoms, completely eliminating the challenge of juggling the ground forces and the Banshees. So since we are just holding this area, we have cleared the mission without jumping. Kikawani Station's pretty tough. The ground segments, that is, the level takes place mostly in a Banshee. However, the ground segments are a bit more challenging. If you dismount at the wrong locations, you can become soft-locked in regards to the challenge. That is to say, you would need to jump to get out of them. So it is important to be careful when you choose your landing locations. When clearing the tunnels, it requires a little bit more pathfinding, but it's definitely possible to clear these sections by using the stairs and ramps to progress. There's also a Scarab fight. And while it was easy to take them on in Halo 3 with the Hornet, that was with a ton of backup. This time we just have the Phantom that we commandeered, and it's not drawing a lot of fire. So the airspace around the Scarab was like a cloud of flak. After several failed attempts, I just ended up bailing from the Banshee and boarding the Scarab on foot. This actually worked out, but our Banshee was caught in the blast. Luckily, after walking up the ramp and into the next tunnel, there's another Banshee that we can use to clear the rest of the level. For the final two missions, we play as the Rookie again. Data Hive is our first mission, where we get to link up with our lost squad mate Dare. The first part of the level consists of descending down towards her location. This reminds me an awful lot of Sacred Icon, but luckily this place was built by humans, to be accessible by humans. So to get down, we follow the corridors, go down ramps, and drop between levels using pistons. Okay, that last one was not the most practical for human design, but oh well. Once we reach Dare, we have to go through a drone hive in order to reach the superintendent's location. There are some tricky spots where if you're not careful, you could get stuck, as jumping across is the intended solutions, but there's plenty of alternate routes to choose from, luckily. I ultimately chose to run and gun through this section, because fun fact, the bright colored drones are called Poopas, and since they are the earliest stage of the drone's life cycle, they can be taken out by one shot from any weapon. So with a good accuracy, this section can be run through without much resistance, except for the shielded Hive ward at the end. He got the drop on me. After retrying, we're able to clear that. After fighting through this, we find Virgil, the engineer who merged with the superintendent, or at least that's what I think he did. From here, all we must do is return to the surface. Luckily this time, we can just use the elevators. Don't know why we couldn't use those coming down. Anyways. Coastal Highway takes place directly after this. We reach the surface and fight our way to the highway. With the help of shields from Virgil, this goes by pretty easily. Once we reach the highway, the rest of the mission is a breeze, with warthogs, goshawks, and a scorpion. It's easy to tear through the Covenant and reach the extraction site. Oh no. Oh no. Son of a gun. This barricade could be a problem. You can't clear it easily on foot, but similar to how we use the Shade Turret in Halo Combat Evolved, we can actually just position the tank in the proper position and use the dismount to climb out and onto the top of the barricade. A simple solution. After this, all we have to do is hole up and survive through the final firefight. I said survive through the firefight. Okay, the hunters were a bit of a challenge without the ability to jump, but we eventually got them. With that, we can use a gravity lift to get into the Phantom and leave the city. Winter Contingency is an interesting level that takes the players through a plethora of environments. The lands around the farmstead consist of rolling hills that are easy to traverse, and for a large portion of it, you have trucks that you can drive as opposed to walking. After saving the missing troopers, we ride the Falcon to the next area where a firefight commences. This doesn't take long, and when finished, we are able to clear the rest of the level without issue. There's plenty of stairs and ramps to work with in the base, so we complete the mission with no problems. Oni Sword Base has the potential to be an interesting level. Although a lot of the level takes place in the bounds of the base itself, there's a good chunk of it that has you venture outside the walls into the wild. Of course, you're given warthogs, 3 as a matter of fact.
How am I supposed to drive all these things?
So it shouldn't be too difficult. All of the buttons you must push during this part can be accessed by staircases, but I will admit, I self-locked myself a few times trying to descend without the stairs. That is to say, just stick to the stairs, Noble Six, and you'll be Gucci. Turns out, it wasn't as interesting as I thought. Once we get back to the base, the hunter fight is obnoxious, but it doesn't dampen our stride. So using the mini ramps in the interior, we're able to reach the roof and finish the level. If this challenge is sounding boring so far, it's because it is. I guess Reach's level design is just pretty flat. I have a theory that they made it this way so that Noble Team's AI didn't have trouble traversing sections, but I don't really have evidence to back that. just my own logic, but everyone wanted to see this one, so I'm gonna keep going anyways. Nightfall was a level I thought would be easy, and it was, but it was harder than it should have been because June kept blowing our cover. Dare did that in ODST by throwing grenades at sleeping drones, but I didn't bring it up because those were easy to kill. June aggro shielded elites, and that is extraordinarily bothersome, so I'm bringing this up. But most of the level can just be ran through. You don't have to do the firefight section or anything. In fact, it was broken anyways, like literally we just sat there in silence for a while. Not really wanting to fight too many more enemies, I just use speedrun tactics to skip to the end of the level, so we clip through a door with a forklift and run to the end. So once again, no issues not jumping. Tip of the Spear is the level that meets the vehicle quota. That is to say, it was easy. After the first section at least, those turrets and ultra elites were highly annoying. Blowing up the AA turrets is easy, just make sure to not let an NPC kidnap you while you're firing the turrets, and also be careful not to drift off cliffs. Even if it looks sick, you don't want to reset the checkpoint. Once we get inside the Spire's shield, there are actually a lot of options to reach the top. Typically, I would go along the right side and use the jetpack to boost into the gravity lift, but that'd be too easy, so I didn't do that. Another way is to fight to the base of the spire and go up that way. That would be too hard, so we didn't do that either. Instead, I opted to stun a Banshee and take it to the top. Easy enough. 6 tries to ruin the challenge by jumping into the Falcon, but I'm not counting that because it's a cutscene. Because I already know someone is typing that out. Long Night of Solace is very easy. If there were any obstacles that required jumping, I would be shocked, but there's not. The saber part of the level is rough on Legendary, but it only takes a couple tries to get through. Once boarding the Corvette, I actually thought a Ranger tricks me, because once you drop down, you clearly can't go back up to the sabers because that would require jumping. A Ranger fleed up there, and I thought he was going to camp up there for all of his life, which is an issue since you can't shoot through the shield, and you need to finish him off to progress. Fortunately, he did decide to grow some balls and fight me hand to hand. That did not end well for him. The fight for the hangar was another tough section. All of the Marines decided to go ahead and take their nap, but once we got reinforcements, the rest of the mission is easy. Taking the bridge is simple enough, and defending the slip space bomb was a breeze. Unsurprisingly, we are able to clear this without issue. I was not surprised in the slightest. We'd seen how easy ships are all throughout the series. The Pillar of Autumn, simple. Truth and Wreck, no problem. Even High Charity, that had these environment areas, was no issue. So this one, no problem. Exodus is dreadful. So here's the thing. If you don't want to include jetpacks, it's not possible. There's ways to clear the mission without the jetpack, but all those solutions require jumping. A lot. But I know that most of my viewers wouldn't consider game mechanics as cheating. Also, no, you can't hijack a Banshee to bypass the section. I know somebody would say something about that, but you can't. So I will leave that up to you, the viewer, to decide if this counts or not. Of course, I'm only using the jetpack when absolutely necessary, and let me tell you, I regret that decision. The section with all the brutes, with their fancy concussion rifles, is incredibly dumb. Fighting on the low ground was a nightmare, but I did eventually get past them. After that section, you just have to ride a Falcon and then get the defense system on 9. I was really exhausted by this point, so I just grabbed an active camo and snuck past everything at the end here. So yeah, once again, no problem, not jumping. New Alexandria is it's New Alexandria. You are flying between locations, and the destinations are human structures. So there's stairs to get places. No issue sticking to the challenge, although getting hunters on my first location sucks given my default loadout. So other than that headache, we're good. The package could have been tricky, but Bungie stuck to the safe level design. So the outside section is easily cleared with the Scorpion, and then once we get inside, even though the elevators no longer work, we still have ramps to work with. Also, I lied. Apparently the elevators do work. Anyways, the rest of the mission is just defending Halsey's lab, so we're golden. Still no jumps. We're almost to the end here. The Pillar of Autumn is the last real mission, so if we can clear it, we will have finished the challenge. I will give it credit. This was the hardest mission to complete the challenge with, so the first section requires us to reach these mongooses, and although I was tight on ammo, it was still very doable. The drive-in section is also breeze, and once we reach this next fortified area with a wraith and a lot of troops, it would seem that we can't progress as there's a roadblock that we can't squeeze by. But if we go around the back of this building here, the fence is down and we can just walk across the down fence. The crevice area is pretty easy. It's eroded by high winds, or at least it looks like it is, so all the surfaces are smoothed and easy to walk on. So you'd think it'd get tougher close to the autumn with the industrial setting, but we start on the high ground, so it mostly just consists of descending. Also, there are stairs that allow for high ground to be retaken. The combat in this section can be a bit rough, but nothing stops us from staying grounded. Once we give keys the package, we just have to reach the mass driver. There's no obstacles blocking the path, so the only problem is clearing the zealots. Blah. But nothing is impossible with a precision weapon and a plasma pistol. So we destroy the Covenant cruiser and complete the mission without jumping. So the first mission, simply called The Dawn, really breaks the mold compared to our usual operations. Aside from Halo 3, most of the first missions are easy. Halo 4 is going to put up a bit more of a fight, as we'll see. Most of the interior sections don't have any huge obstacles, but once we exit the Dawn to ready the defenses, I run into the first problem. Now there's no obstacle, there's nothing we need to scale, but the combat is a bit tricky here. Since we're on Legendary, it takes a lot more to take down each enemy, and the weapons that are dropped, well, some of them just tend to float out of reach because there's no gravity. But nevertheless, we eventually are able to ration our ammunition properly and get the missile launched. Once back inside, we have our first real obstacle, like a challenging one we haven't seen back since before Halo 3. The Dawn is falling apart, and although we are very close to the end of the mission, there is a gap we have to clear. On the first attempt, I had nothing on me to get past this, but I had a bit of an inkling of how to get past this. Restarting the level, I made sure to hold on to some frag grenades, and I also decided to hang on to this concussion rifle that I found off of this elite. After all, it's very similar to the brute shot we made use of in Halo 3. So once I finally get back to this section, it's a matter of using a combination of the grenade and concussion rifle blast to just barely get me over this gap. Fortunately, that was the only obstacle during this section of the mission, so after a few doors down, we are able to complete the mission with 0 jumps. The second mission, Requiem, takes a lot longer to complete. It's a lengthy mission after all, and there is some obstacles in our way. So once Master Chief gets up, he's in the debris field, but we can make our way to the beautiful part of the game. Yes, this is my favorite set piece in the game. And mount up in a Warthog to cover the ground quicker. Once we get to the end of this vehicle section, we face our first challenge for the mission. Similar to Halo 3's missions, there is a ledge blocking the way forward. While I was brainstorming how to get past this, luck struck me. Well, it actually struck the sniper tower, and created a pretty convenient ramp at that. After walking up this ramp, the rest of the mission went as per usual, because as the missions came before, the Forerunners love architecture that has ramps and elevators, so we can easily reach the end of the mission. Next up is the mission Forerunner. Fighting the Prometheans on legendary difficulty is quite frustrating at times, but after playing so much, I did get used to it again. The mission was going fine until I encountered a platforming obstacle. I suppose the Forerunners only go so far with their ramps. After all, they did build the whole planet, so it's only fair for them to cut back and not have ramps everywhere on the exteriors. But the problem still stands. This ledge can't be climbed, and there's no magical luck to help me out this time. I tried all sorts of techniques that worked in past titles, notably running against the ledge, trying to catch any sort of slope surface that the ramp might offer. I think I got a little bit of elevation with this, but it is hard to tell. Regardless, I couldn't get it to work. Unfortunately, I had been a bit liberal with my use of weapons and grenades, but I just knew that if I had a frag grenade, I could get over this ledge. If it could help me clear the fire pit, then well, it could probably help me clear this rock, surely. So I restarted the mission, and this time I held on to my grenades, like the precious cargo that they are. After I made it back to this part, I threw it at my feet, and crouched at the peak of the blast, and surely enough, it worked. Even though we cleared that part of the mission, it isn't over yet. The fighting is definitely draining, but we reached the orb, get tricked into thinking there is a required jump, realize it's just an awkwardly implemented elevator, and reach the end of the mission. You would think that the mission Infinity would be tough, given that mostly takes place in the jungle, which was once again one of the most troublesome settings in Halo 3, but as it turns out, there aren't any obstacles impeding our traversal. Don't get me wrong, the binary rifles suck, but the level design didn't cause any issues. After securing the LZ, the rest of the mission takes place in vehicles. First a Scorpion tank, and then after dismounting for a few seconds, a Mantis. So after repelling the attackers from the Infinity, we can safely say that we can complete this mission without jumping. Proclaimer was shockingly exciting. This is the first mission that reintroduces the jetpack, but luckily this time it is purely optional and not a forced gimmick. Or at least that's what they want you to think, but I'll explain that in a second. Most of this mission involves riding on the Mammoth, which is quite nice. Being in an indestructible vehicle makes the fighting a lot easier on Legendary. After so much of this though, we are attacked by a Lich, which we have to board. Luckily, instead of using a jetpack, there is a gravity lift in which we can board. Once inside, we destroy the Lich, and we have to make a quick exit. But here's the thing, ever since Halo Reach, there was fall damage added. This means if we were to jump out too far up, we would shatter our legs on the ground. The intended solution is to use the jetpack to soften your fall so that you don't take fall damage when jumping out of the Lich, but we're avoiding doing that. Luckily, as the Lich is being destroyed, it's in a death spiral of sorts, out of control, giving us lots of different possible landing locations. And since the level design is very stagnated, there are tall rocks that we can use to land softly, well, softer. So after watching the flight path, I saw my opportunity and sprinted to the other side of the Lich to fling myself out the other side. I was able to successfully land without dying. It still hurt quite a bit, but after this section, we make our way through the sniper alley, enter the Forerunner building, and chat with the librarian. Once this part's complete, the rest of the level takes place in a Scorpion and is a cakewalk. No jumping necessary. Shutdown is a mission that is usually really easy to speedrun and skip most of the level, but that trick requires a jetpack. I tried it without it. I didn't try very hard, but I did try without it and I couldn't get it. So I just decided we're going to see if you can do the mission regularly without the skips and without jumping. The first tower I decided to hit amounted to a gondola section. This series does like its gondolas after all. It was pretty time consuming, as is the nature of these parts, but there's no issues. There are 2 stops that you must get off the gondola, but there are light bridges and ramps, so there's no problem handling this part. The second tower has me go around and destroy some orbs. Once again, no issue here aside from not being able to jump to avoid the incineration cannon. With that, we head to the third tower, which would be where we started if we could have done the skips, but that's besides the point. We start to make our way through the tower, but then the Didact starts to do some renovations, and for some reason this gap he makes feels really personal. Can't put my finger on why, but it feels personal. Luckily, I stocked up on all my munitions when leaving the Pelican, so I had some grenades this time. I would have tore my hair out if I had to restart the mission at this point because I needed grenades, but I've been holding on to them. Then it was just a matter of scaling the rest of the tower. The gravity lifts takes us to the next floor, and we can steal a Banshee to skip the rest of the mission combat and potential obstacles that would be in that room. Don't know why there is a Banshee on an interior like this, but we take what we can get. Luckily, the part at the end of the mission where you jump off the ledge doesn't require you to actually jump. With that, we have another mission down. Composer is a very easy mission to complete without jumping. Most of the corridors that fights take place in don't have enough room to jump anyways. The sections that aren't this close quarters has you fight off aircrafts with a Mantis. After repelling the Covenant from the station, we have finished the mission without jumping. Quite easy this time. The final mission of the game is Midnight. Although it starts as an aerial mission, the level quickly turns into a ground game. Once we are aboard the Didact ship, we spend a majority of the mission going through different portals until we finally end up at the Composer. Here we use gravity lifts to traverse from pedestal to pedestal to allow for Cortana to drop the shield. We use one last gravity lift and we are able to finish the game without jumping. And with that final level, we can officially say you can beat Halo the Master Chief Collection without jumping. Purely vanilla, mind you. Please consider liking and subscribing to the video. It helps me out a ton. And until the next time, bye bye.